Hey, folks, welcome. I'm excited to speak with Elisha Daeva today. She is the author of Before War on marriage, hierarchy, and our matriarchal origins. So I want to share a quick story about how I came into this book. A colleague of mine said, given what you're up to, you need to read this book. So I ordered it maybe 6, 9 months ago. It sat there on my shelf as I was going through other stuff, and she pinged me again. She's like, have you read the book yet? Like, all right, I'll read it. And I am really upset that I didn't read this before I wrote my book because there's so much
Oh,
in this that I would like to include. So I'll share a little bit about the book and then we'll turn it over to Alicia. Um, so I found this book to be profound because it aggregated so many perspectives across fields, and I learned just a ton. I mean, it's all connected, and there's like bunch of just call it like portals into questions I
mhm.
didn't even know I had in this book. And so I have a ton of questions. And without further ado, Alicia, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm actually tearing up. It means so much to me to hear people say stuff like that, that it's on its own in the world and there are people who feel strongly about it. So I'm a little clamped.
Well, good. Well, I will keep the love coming because as I shared with you in the little summary I did, um, I think it's the most important book that has come out since Dawn of Everything, which is a big statement in my view and the view I think of a lot of people who are really trying to get a handle on where we're at. So
Mm,
thank you for this huge contribution.
thank you. Yeah, obviously I quote that book liberally in Before War. I find that a really important book too, and I'm glad to hear that that one is also making the rounds and is seen as groundbreaking and important as it is.
It's, it is. Your tears are welcome here because I mean I'm feeling it too. I feel like this is like a kairotic moment, like everything is happening all at once. Like this like
Mm,
new understanding of who we are is like whoa, history, self-concept, the future is like veils being lifted, and it's because of this book
yes.
that I'm excited to dive into. So,
Thank
my first question for you is like, I know that you've been studying this, and obviously your lived experience, having been on the business end of patriarchy in your body for your whole life, basically. Um, but like all authors, you had to eventually say, "All right, I'm going to stop messing with this thing and push it." But your understanding of reality kept unfolding. So I'm curious, what has what meaningful developments have happened since you published this a couple years ago?
Well, I mentioned in the book that only recently, like in the last 10 years, have we had the technology to determine relatedness from DNA studies. And so there have been three major ones that have come out just since the book was published 3 years ago now, that are relevant in this area of relatedness DNA studies. So to sort of recap for listeners, there's matrilineal inheritance, means that a culture counts their lineage through their mother. So instead of saying I'm the son of David, it's I'm the daughter of the mother and then the mother and then the mother, which we still are basically patrilineal in the sense that we take our father's names. And then it's really related to matrifocal or patrifocal, which is do the women remain together and that like in a tribe and then have men come from outside and marry into the tribe, or do the men stay together and the women come and live with their husbands? And it's kind of a moot point in modern Western life where a man and a woman usually as a couple go get their own house. So we don't have a tribe anymore where people marry into it. But it was a really big deal, in ancient times with the clan and the tribe societies, whether the core of the tribe was the men, the related men that would stay, and the women, they would bring in wives from outside or vice versa. Because for a woman, in a patrilocal society, she basically had to leave her relations to go live with her husband. It might have been far away. She may never have seen her relations again. And that meant that she was very vulnerable to her husband was her only advocate. And she was vulnerable to any kind of abuse. There was nowhere to run away to, and she didn't have the help of her kin to raise the children so much. So she was kind of on her own. Whereas if you stay in your matrilineal clan, you have your mother, your sisters, and your brothers, and your mother's brother was kind of your family system to all come together and raise the children. So, and you had all of the women you grew up with and the guys you grew up with. So if any guy was bothering you, you had a whole bunch of people that had your back.
Yeah.
Whereas you are a total stranger in a strange land in your husband's tribe, you were on your own, and women's power was essentially eliminated. So this whole matrilineal, matrifocal thing was a big deal. So now that they can determine the relatedness of skeletons, of ancient skeletons, they're starting to do these tests on ancient societies to see were all the males in this burial related. Here we found 24 skeletons. Are the males related to each other, or are the females related to each other? And in the book, I predicted that if they were to test Neolithic societies before the influx of steppe DNA, because it was the steppe nomads, both Indo-Europeans and Semitic people, these two groups that came from the Russian steppes, this very harsh grassland environment, kind of where Ukraine is now. Those were the people that were mainly initially affected by the initial wave of patriarchy, and then they conquered the world. And so everyone they came in contact with would usually become patriarchal. So, so my prediction was if you look at any society before steppe contact or before contact with later Indo-Europeans, that if you did a relatedness test, they would show related females. And for some reason, academia is still really clueless about this, but the three studies have come out in the past 2 or 3 years. One in the early Celts, which is kind of a later matriarchal society, and not fully matriarchal by the time of the Celts. I mean, they were even Indo-European, but they were only barely Indo-Europeanized, meaning
Mhm.
that the female majority of the people that they had colonized still had a lot of power. So we imagine druids that are still very connected with nature. They actually had also patrilineal inheritance later on, but this study showed early Iron Age Celts still had matrilineal inheritance. And another one was from China, like 4,000 years ago, was still matrilineal. And Çatalhöyük, this one pretty well-known Neolithic site from around 6,000 years ago in what is now Turkey. And that was a big one I talk about in my book. I've been there. It was kind of a very pivotal society with a lot of goddess figurines and a really cool system of houses that you go in from the top of the roofs and go in. It's kind of like an adobe city. So they were one of the earliest, most advanced cities around 6,000 BC. And a study just came out a month or two ago showing that it had matrilineal inheritance. And
Wow.
that study actually was widely reported in mainstream news. So I saw it so many times. And with clickbaity headlines like
Mhm.
"Did women rule?" 3,000 years ago or whatever, and so of course there was all kinds of pushback and laugh reacts and stuff from
Mhm.
triggered men and stuff. But that definitely got some wide play. So the DNA, and if you read the actual, there's the clickbaiting news stories, and then there's the actual academic study. And in the academic study, they're usually like mystified, like, and in the news reports too, they act all surprised, like, big shocker. It's like, no, no, this
Yeah.
isn't surprising. If you ask me, I could tell you exactly which societies are going to have versus patrilineal inheritance once you look at the DNA. Like, no, this is not a
Mm.
mystery anymore. You just keep ignoring it and then saying it's a surprise.
Well, that thank you. And just speaking for myself, like, I read Chalice and the Blade maybe 5, 10 years ago.
Mm.
And I was like, wow, this is great. But it didn't like land in me until I read your book because it had
Ah.
so much of the DNA evidence. I'm like,
Mm.
oh, whoa. Like, so, um, and again, we're all in our journey of like decolonizing and trying to, but for whatever reason, that DNA evidence like made the difference for me. Like, I was like, oh,
Oh,
okay. Now I'm like there's a tread on the tire. So thank you for continuing to aggregate that and share that out. Um,
someone had to take, Chalice and the Blade was 30 years ago.
yeah,
So, a lot has happened. And, for everybody, it's a different thing where it really clicks into place, where you see it to the point where you can't unsee it, where it's like, oh, and then it's like that lens is just everywhere. You can't even
can't unsee it.
understand
Mm,
much of what's happening now or 5,000 years ago without that.
yeah, yeah. Um, have another kind of research, opinion question for you. I've been like since reading your book, I've just been noticing a lot of the the patriarchal structures and a lot in different ways, but also like listening for like the matriarchal kind of tendrils. Um, and I just have a couple anecdotal evidence, pieces where like I'm noticing folks want to like live closer to their mother or to their
Hmm.
sister. And
Hmm.
I'm curious, have you seen anything in terms of like demographic shifts? Because frequently folks will meet at college or they'll meet in a big city at a job, and then they'll have to move somewhere to raise the kids.
Hmm.
And I'm wondering, is there any data that's saying like it's more likely to go towards the mom's family or the dad's?
Fascinating. I would love to look into that because that's hopeful. I haven't been very hopeful lately in terms of where things are going because the pendulum is shifting, is so going so far towards the right wing and this like huge, you know, shaming campaign of trying to get women to have babies
Hmm.
and trad wife stuff. So unfortunately, that is like I'm kind of telling people, wake me up in 10 years because I really don't want to have to sit through this and watch this. But I'd be grateful for any little tidbits of hope like that. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not surprise. I would not be surprised. I would assume that more people are attempting to live closer to one grandmother or the other when they have kids. And that could just be an artifact of the fact that it's gotten so much more expensive. Childcare is more expensive. It's just really harder to make ends meet. And that's the reason why so many women don't want to do it.
Mm,
And obviously having a grandma, the mother to help with that is going to be a huge factor. So that makes sense. And there has, I would say that like the urge towards intentional communities and wanting to join forces in that way is even without people being conscious of the matriarchy stuff is a step
mhm,
in the right direction. Just knowing that, hey, let's join forces and it'll go back towards the village clan structure of raising kids makes a lot of sense. So
mhm,
that's a little bit hopeful. And I see more people like consciously choosing a partner and consciously choosing to have children, like even looking for a co-parent that's distinct from let's fall in love and
mhm.
get married and then have kids as opposed to no, let's consciously co-parent. I'm looking for a co-parent. If we're lovers, great. If not, maybe that's actually going to be better in the long run. So I do see more people kind of putting that out there that they're looking for a co-parent and a lover is kind of here and there come and go.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's encouraging. my ex-wife and I, that's one of the reasons like why we started to, it sort of reveal like the value split as we were thinking about having kids together. I'm like, I don't want to, I don't want to do this to you in like a suburban single family home. I mean, like I've seen, like I grew up with these women. I'm surrounded by them in the Bay Area. I'm like, I don't want to do that for you, like, or to you. Like, let's do it communally. And yeah, she was like, "No, I want one of everything. I'm gonna have to clean and take care of." I'm like, "All right, I think we're done here." Um,
Mm.
so, switch gears a little bit and talk about one of the central premises of the book that, I think you cite the authors who did the research around kind of this desertification that happened between North Africa and Russian steppe. Um, on one, I think it was in your conclusion. There's a map where it kind of looks like the desert. There's also desertification in kind of Mesoamerica area, and my curiosity, just given all these reports that we hear about Aztecs and like like vicious, like brutal, like sacrificing virgins and all this kind of stuff. Do you think like patriarchy could have like arisen there too, or was it an import, via sea? I mean, like, what's your current read?
So, this is a question I get so often,
Uh-huh.
um, and usually from a would-be detractor,
Mm,
um, patriarchy denier, um, male supremacist, saying, "Oh, well, obviously patriarchy is natural and inevitable because it was in the Americas when Columbus came." And that's making a really big assumption, one that has been forced on us in our extremely like childish narrative that we're told about the Americas, that it was somehow mysteriously, magically sealed off from the rest of the world until 1492.
mm,
That is one of the biggest lies that we're told, and one of the biggest cover ups and academic groupthink dogmas, in terms of the level of derision, scorn, and canceling that you'll get for questioning it. So the very fact that so many people have that question is the reason why I'm 3 chapters in, and it's going to go quick. I think it could come out in the next month or two. The sequel to Before War is going to be Before America, and
whoa.
um, detailing that very
Uh-huh.
thing,
Uh-huh.
how patriarchy came to America, because I don't think there was a
Yeah.
corresponding desertification event. So the main way that most people on Earth became patriarchalized was through contact with the people who were in the desert. And so pretty much every patriarchal culture that I've looked at has clear signs of contact with steppe nomads. Culturally, well, either genetically, they have R1A and R1B, which are the two Indo-European haplogroups that show that, there was genetic mixing, but also clear cultural signs, like they have um, certain clothing or cultural things such as feasting. These like chiefmans giving a feast in a very
Mm,
particular ways was very typical of the steppe nomad culture. So the only cultures that I'm really not certain about having contact with Indo-Europeans or Semites is the Papua New Guineans, to the
mhm,
point where, and the Aboriginal Australians, some of whom are patriarchal and some of whom are matriarchal, but there's a huge density of different cultures in Papua New Guinea, suggesting that it was kind of an origin point. But and a lot of them are very harshly patriarchal. So I almost think maybe that's from a different patriarchal event, maybe a much
mm,
older one, since they're very, very ancient cultures. But yeah, the evidence for pre-Columbus contact in the Americas is overwhelming,
mhm,
and the level of cultural correspondences that are so precise, like like that they dismiss as being coincidence. Oh, they just independently evolved. Really? Like mummifying people by like pulling their intestines out their butt and then using, I mean, like something like mummification and building ziggurats that look exactly like this with a stair right here that
Uh,
has like two, gorgons with their tongues out on either side of the balustrade
mhm,
and
mhm.
the Roman arch and the reed boat that has a man with a bird wings at the front of the prow guiding the boat. And I mean, I could go on and on and on of all these cultural correspondences between Incas and the pre-Inca people, um, with Mesopotamian cultures. And then all the inscriptions that were left behind, the coins, various artifacts, many of which have been hidden, ignored, but mostly dismissed as hoaxes, which is ridiculous. Like some of those inscriptions were in languages that hadn't even been deciphered when they were like dug up by a farmer in Minnesota, in like
Wow.
1872. And it's like, oh, yeah, that's a hoax. Well, that's not even language. And then 50 years later, it's like, oh, actually, that was ancient Libyan script. Oh, okay, somebody, buried that or just it's ridiculous. So that's what I'm writing about now. But I even might think it's deeper than that. It's not like, oh, Europe colonized the Americas. That's not the story. More like another culture colonized both places because civilization sprang up completely fully formed out of nowhere, not only in Peru and Mexico, the Olmecs, but also in Egypt and Mesopotamia. So, I mean, there was old Europe, like these cultural aspects arrived out of nowhere. So, yeah, it'll all be in before America, like how that happened, but it's definitely not like, oh, Europe colonized America. It was like these there's civilization one that was going around the world and creating colonies,
Yeah.
and that has strong patriarchal side to it.
I'm so excited for that, and if there's any way I can support, be an early reader, like, I'm
Oh
I'm here
yeah.
for it because,
Hey.
I mean, as you share in your book, like, history is so important to our self-concept, and
Mhm.
that we've got so much of it wrong, um, and that there are books, like yours and this new one, which I'm like, I can't wait to can't wait for it.
Yeah.
Um, well, so thank you for that, and I do look forward to learning more about this. You know, one of the things I was like super curious about is I was like seeing your pictures and like accounts of all these different places, and it brought to mind this like kind of like female Indiana Jones of sorts, where you're like, you got your satchel and you're like going to all these different, you know cultures that have like matriarchal like origins, but also like ongoing practices. I'm just like, I bet it must have been cool. But I bet it must have been like felt like really empowering and so I would just love to hear from you, like, what was it like to visit these places and like kind of to take it in from the
Yeah, like I find it really deeply moving to be in traditional cultures, like village cultures, that it just feels really normal to me. Like waking up with like the babble of kids' voices by the river, and then to see the older girls helping to take care of the little kids, and just this sort of like pack of little kids splashing in the river. Um, just feels really right. And it's like, oh, yeah, I would totally have chosen to be a mother in this situation. It's not normal for your kids to be up under you 24/7. Like, that's not what normal ancient people signed up for. By the time the child was 4, they were old enough to run around with the little kids, and it was safe for them to do so. And you weren't having to do much even, collective meals and then just to see little girls with full consciousness of their confidence,
Mm,
um, and women. I sort of mentioned in the book how in most of these cultures that I went to were in Southeast Asia and southern India, and the women are just have completely different body language
Mm,
than women in the patriarchal cultures in Southeast Asia, particularly. And well, Southeast Asia is better than most places, but um, like Western India, where it's a completely different way that they hold themselves, way that they walk. They're sitting there with their, cross-legged and laughing and fully part of the thing, as opposed to kind of just serving and scurrying out and ducking
mhm,
their head and kind of trying not to take up a lot of space. Taking up space,
mhm,
I mean, the whole concept of manspreading has been widely ridiculed by, maybe overused and, ridiculed by sort of male supremacists but the amount of space that an individual feels empowered to occupy is kind of an indication of how much worth they feel, and it is
mm,
a massive relief for the nervous system to be in a place where the women feel entitled to speak and take up space.
yeah, I love that. So you talk a little bit about like posture or like their way of being. Like, I'd love to hear just a couple more specific because I have some ideas what I think that means, but I'm curious, like, what does it mean to like for a woman to take up space or to inhabit a different energy or way of being?
Like in those cultures, a lot of those cultures, the old ladies chew this root that makes their mouth red, and they're just like they're chewing it and they're spitting it, and they sit, with like, instead of sitting, even in the West, even after feminism and stuff, we so often cross our legs and kind of like clamp down on our legs, and
Hmm.
that, their legs are like spread, and sometimes they are topless, and that just, like, looks and feels totally natural, as opposed to this sort of, like, awareness of the breast. It's just like, "This
Hmm.
is my body."
Hmm.
And, um, and they walk, um, with, like, wide steps, you
Hmm.
see, like, in a lot of patriarchal cultures, like, in Japan, they have these little mincing steps.
Hmm. Hmm.
So that's kind of another, like, someone once told me, "God, you walk like a man, you take these big steps," and I'm like, You should walk more demurely." I'm like, "Yeah, fuck that."
Exactly.
Getting where I'm going.
Uh, no, it's interesting because I love watching like little kids just like kind of like see what like how they comport themselves and like what phase of enculturation they're in.
Right.
Um, and my favorite phase is like when like they're just like, "Ah, this whole clothes thing sucks." They're just like shirts off, pants off, like they're just and the amount of effort that society goes to try to like to make them not have their be naked in public is so funny to me. Because I think at different points in my journey, like I had some reversion. I'm like, oh, what's wrong with those kids? Why are they? But now I'm like, yeah, those kids are feral. They need to stay that way.
As long as they can, yeah. I mean, I actually have a memory of the first time that, like, I don't really remember how I came to consciousness of it, but just that, like, if I am wearing a dress or a skirt, that I need to make sure that my underwear can't be seen, like to tuck my skirt in and stuff. And I'm really interested in the way those messages get given to especially girls,
Mhm,
around body shame, because it's actually so big. It's a really, and it's unspoken. In most cases, no one's actually, specifically says,
mhm,
these are the parts of your body that you can show, and these are the parts that you can't. I mean, there must be a moment, where people are taught that, but it
yeah,
varies so much from culture to culture and even from setting to setting. So the kind of leg that you can show in a nightclub without getting rude stares is different from, on a beach. Um, so all of these very like microcultural norms around how much of the body can be shown, almost always like the female body. It's all kind of a mysterious way that that's transmitted, and it even changes, with fashions and seasons.
Yeah. Yeah, I it's something I have, like, obviously no appreciation of. Like, I wear the same thing almost all the time. Like, with it's weather dependent, but, like, I'm never like, am I showing too much arm or too much leg with these shorts? Like, it's just not part of my enculturation. Now, you obviously it seems like you're hip to the way that, like, we kind of shame emotions out of boys and girls like that.
Yeah.
That's something that I have to be careful with because um, can be too emotional or too
Mhm.
outspoken in some groups where I'm or seen as that way. I'm obviously not, but yeah, the whole kind of body piece, that's very much a new or not a lived experience for me. Um,
Would you say they've
Go
it's
ahead.
gotten better? Would you say that it's gotten better in terms of you feeling okay to express emotions, in some circles or
I mean, the only place where I have to kind of titrate is in business communities.
yeah,
But I've been in Northern California for almost 20 years, so
right.
and almost all that doing men's work. So I'm just with men who are like can drop
Right.
into tears at you know any moment.
That's cool.
But it is interesting, like because California, and you're in Asheville, right?
Yeah,
And like there are pockets that are like rapidly evolving, and then there are pockets that are like moving very slowly. So when I get kind of transported into like a midwestern or a southern or
mm,
northeast scenario to do like put on my business hat and stuff, to be like, okay, how much fun can I have here? How real can I be here?
right.
um but yeah, so I'm curious, like, you know I feel like for myself, I know that we're in a transition, that we're moving back to these old ways, that kind of like the Sankofa bird thing, like looking to the past to find the keys to the future kind of thing. But like in your words, like what do you think this transition looks like for broadly, like United States or Western cultures? Like what are the markers? What are the things that we could pay attention to, and maybe even on the personal level, like say folks who I can't even imagine being married and reading this. I'd be like, "Oh shit!" Like, so I'm
I
curious, like,
know.
what do you do with all this, like, in this transition period?
Yeah, I mean, it might be like sort of too late for older generations that are already sort of like married and nuclear families and stuff. Although they could easily, I mean, I think that what that would look like is really encouraging more of those extended family situations. So, can we move closer to our cousins and, co-raise our kids together? Um, can can we, yeah, just prioritize our grandparents, things like that? Maybe looking more towards girls who are coming up now in terms of how the family money is transferred.
Hmm.
So, how can we reserve our family money towards the females in the family who are choosing to have kids? And if nobody's choosing to have kids, then, you know, it doesn't really matter. But really reserving, it's less about inherit, like which child is going to inherit for them, and more about who's going to have kids that they need to support,
Hmm.
and having, men reserve more of their money for, especially if a man decides he doesn't want to be a parent, put some of that money towards his nieces and nephews,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
really start thinking more towards that, like family money supporting the children in the family, as opposed to supporting a sexual partner who may or may not actually be, um, having your biological child. Sorry, but you never really know.
Yeah.
Um, Sometimes the obvious, like, "Oh, that knows,
Yeah.
definitely."
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
but, the chances are extremely high that you're gonna hate this person in 10 years. I mean, that's a really bleak, cynical way to look at it, but statistically, unfortunately, there seems to
Mhm.
be something about the whole process that ends up embittering people. It's really
Yeah.
tragic, but we weren't evolved, to be having sex with the same person forever. Most of us. It works for some people, and boy, am I jealous of them. More power to them. If they make it work, I'm just like, "Woohoo! I wanna have a party for you. You are awesome. You're blazing. You won the award." But for most people, I mean, I guess the biggest part of the transition, I would say, would be, normalizing co-parent contracts.
Mhm.
So even if you are going to have a sort of traditional patriarchal relationship, monogamous relationship, get married, that whole thing, make your contract when you're still happy together specific towards your co-parenting as being the relationship that you will be in for the rest of your life. Because
Mhm.
chances are you're not going to be in monogamous sexual partners for the rest of your life, but you will be co-parents for the rest of your life, hopefully. And you should be very specific from the get-go about what your shared values are. Like you said, you sort of uncovered some of those when the thing of kids came up. But it seems to me that if you're going to make some difficult to get out of changes in your life to be together, like buy real estate or even move in together. I mean, it's really hard to separate once you've been cohabitating, even if you're renting, it's those kind of things. So like, okay, do you wanna have kids? Are you sure you wanna have kids with me? Here's what's really important to me, you know, we have to listen to NPR every morning when the kids are whatever it is, like, just to be very upfront about that, and here's exactly what will happen if the relationship goes south, or even if we don't hate each other, but we both, one or both of us, is attracted to someone else and we're not attracted to each other. So,
Mhm.
really being very explicit, if we buy this house together and then we don't want to live together, like who gets it and how that works and how the kids are traded and what our custody will be. It would, not to mention, it would save so much time, money, and anguish when you already hate each other, in family court. If there was an actual legally binding contract that said we're going to have 50-50 custody, that might even make it so you're not fighting bitterly over that when you already hate each other.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's super wise. Um, one of the things I don't know if it was in your book or maybe I read it somewhere else, but I read something about like how after some point in a woman's pregnancy, the
Mm.
pheromones, shift towards like folks who have their similar genetics. And I'm curious, like, uh, is that your understanding as well? And um, if we should like be baking some of this into like relating, like, hey, by the way, when we're pregnant, you're not going to want anything to do with me, and odds are like sex is going to go out the window within the first 10 years. Like I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
So I'm not aware of the exact study. Like, I quoted a few things in the book that are the effects of hormones on things like attraction. Like, there's all this studies that a woman on that goes off birth control because they decide to get pregnant, all of a sudden they're attracted to a totally different kind of man, which is pretty tragic. Um, being attracted to a different kind of man when you're ovulating, that kind of stuff. So I'm really well convinced of the effects of hormones on the things that we consider to be like our conscious choice or our taste or something. Yeah, we're biological, and there's all these mysterious effects like that. But I think it would behoove people to understand that during the breastfeeding period, for example, she's probably gonna be really, exhausted and hormonal and not want anything to do with him, and certainly not want anything to do with sex. And this is like one of those really tricky subjects that I almost don't ever want to talk about, but I wish there was a way to talk about, because I actually really feel for the man in this situation. Men need sex. Um, Women do too, but to lesser degrees, and to lesser degrees during sort of pregnancy and situations like that, and menopause and situations like that. So I guess that's why I generally advocate for some form of um, polyamory,
Mhm.
which isn't for everyone, but it's just a really, really tender thing to say, and women hate me for this. I mean, women hate me for all sorts of reasons. Unfortunately, I've got, women are even some women are even more conditioned into patriarchy, and so are more attached to things like man the provider.
Mhm.
And so, like, like, during this time when they're weaning the child and they're breastfeeding the child, they need they need their co-partner, their co-parent so much that it's incredibly, offensive and scary to say, like, you should be okay with, like, him having another lover every other Tuesday or something. But I think it would, if she could get over the kind of outrage and jealousy, I think it would suit her too, you
Yeah.
know? And in exchange, have him take the baby while she could do whatever the hell she wants, during those times.
Yeah. I mean, it is interesting. Like I've noticed my own kind of monogamous tendrils like loosening,
Mm,
um, and just how much of identity and fear and like self worth
mhm,
is like tied up in that. Um, when my ex and I were separating, she was like, "I'm going to go to Europe," and I said, "I don't know where this is coming from, but I've thought about it, and I want you to go have as much fun as you possibly can. I don't want to hear about it, but just follow. I'm like, go follow your desire. Like, see if that turns up anything new for you, because
mm.
we're working through some of those issues as part of our, um, yeah, separation. And like after I said it, and I was thinking about it, I was how, where'd that fear response come from? I guess maybe I'm okay with that. Which is kind of a novel thing for me to experience. And I think on some level, if you really love someone, you want what's best for them. And if the situation or the circumstances you can't do that, then man, that's in my judgment a pretty big test of love. Like I'm willing to like look the other way because I love you. Um, yeah, wow. So, but related to that, like you know, you had mentioned it was in the conclusion a bit that what's her name? Gertner Abendroth like wrote a paper on like how some of these communal egalitarian societies are forming. Like, I mean, beyond just kind of consensus decision making and kind of matrilineal transfers of wealth. Like what else does that look like? Like in terms of how we could start relating to each other differently.
I mean, it's up to each one of us to really be self-aware in terms of how we abuse our power. And
Mm.
different people have different types of power in different situations and ways that we get power and abuse it. Um, and women certainly have their own ways of abusing power. Some of them are kind of new since feminism, and some are kind of old, like called feminine wiles or whatever. But even victim consciousness has become a way to abuse power. But um, whether it's you have people working for you or renting from you, different ways that that we try to check ourselves and say, "Hey, am I being fair here? Am I talking over this person? Um, am I using dominance in my body language to try to impose dominance on them, in a way that's kind of like the biggest thing just on a individual level, what we can personally affect, and it's really easy to fool ourselves into thinking that we're not doing that, to try
Yeah.
to win some advantage. Um, and as far as like we don't really have any control over sort of global politics, and sometimes I'm like, God, we almost need some kind of alpha male leader if we're going to be dealing with other alpha males, and then it becomes like a never ending no win solution in
Mhm.
that way. um i- unless there is a coalition of sort of leaders who lead out of matriarchy, whether that's men or women, but enough that can create enough of a coalition, and something like the UN or NATO, that was sort of what that was supposed to be for,
Mhm.
was a coalition to prevent bully states. Um, hasn't really worked out that well, but I guess in communities, the idea would be a coalition of people to prevent bullying. Um, just, if somebody's and to some degree that's happening, with the Me Too thing. And
Mhm.
that also has created a huge backlash. Some people think that it was taken too far and that some people were just jumping on the bandwagon or something. But to some degree, there is more cognizance around sexual harassment and stopping that kind of bullying. Um, and I don't know how it is like on the playground nowadays, if there's more cognizance for teachers as far as
Mm.
how to handle, because I think that it's really underestimated the level of trauma that is carried into adulthood from childhood bullying from your
Yeah.
peers.
Yeah, and what I'm hearing underneath
And
this
there's
is
just
like kind of like a power consciousness that we need
yes.
to like inhabit. I'm growing up in the suburbs. I had no power consciousness, and it was now that I see it, I'm like, oh my god, this is like you just have to squint your eyes. This is a plantation. Like this is not this like power dynamics are the exact same. Maybe like the boundaries a little more squishy, but it's the exact same. And I love how you kind of called it out in your definition of patriarchy, like the deal offered men, the deal offered women, and I see it all like everywhere here. So I'm in Walnut Creek, and it's like white woman in a household, a bunch of people of color like serving her, and like this expectation of service. Um,
Maybe you
so I,
should define for the listeners what is the deal offered, or do you want me to do it?
yeah, please
The
do.
deal.
Yeah.
So the deal offered to men in patriarchy is you get to dominate women, and you can be dominated by more powerful men, either richer men or stronger, bullier men. And the deal offered to women is that if you submit to men and are submissive to men, then you could bully people who are inferior to you in your mind due to class or race.
Mhm. Um, yeah, and my one want for everybody who's watching, listening to this is that they walk away with a curiosity around power, because all of this,
Mm.
patriarchy, white supremacy, ecocide, it's all tangled up in terms of like, this master slave relationship. That's one of the things I thought that David Graeber did really well in his economics book, the debt book, was like look at how this master slave stuff is just baked into law, baked into our language. Like we're always thinking about like you know, like who's in charge and who has no will or authority underneath them. Um,
Yes.
Powerful stuff.
Mm.
So, um, as we move to a close, I just have a couple questions to ask. I'm curious, like as go, modern relationships, and there is this sense that, like, there's like this, what do they call it, the relationship elevator. Like, oh, we're gonna date, then we're gonna be exclusive, and then we're gonna move in, and then we're gonna get married and have kids and all that kind of stuff. And I've heard from my previous partners and from other folks that, like, seeing each other all the time might not be a good thing. And I'm curious, like, what is your read on, like, how often we should be hanging out as lovers, people?
You know, I spent some time at tantra school, um, as a desperate attempt too late to save my own relationship, in which we were basically like brother and sister,
Hmm.
but we had just finished building this house together. And and it was interesting because so like basically right at about 5 years of cohabitation was when the intimacy, even like cuddling and kissing, started to fall by the wayside,
Hmm.
and just kind of naturally. And building a house is about the worst thing you could possibly do to kill your spark. So in tantra school, they say avoid doing mundane things together. So try to try not to, run a business together. Unfortunately, raising kids together is like that, is a real
Hmm.
spark killer, as many parents find out. Um, and I think that's because the patriarchal model of raising kids with your lover like indefinitely is not natural or sustainable. Um, he's supposed to come and go, and you're supposed to have a good time, and then in the morning he's gone, and your brother is there to play
Yeah.
ball with the kid. Um, so so in so I go to tantra school. I'm like, "How do we save our relationship?" And he was just like, "Forget it. Get a new one." I'm like, "I just built a homestead. I can't." And it's like once the spark is gone, it's too late. So what tantra
Uh-huh.
recommends is being really tantric with it from the beginning. So, not doing too many mundane things together, not talking about business, not talking about your problems. Especially don't
Hmm.
talk about your personal problems. Like, find a therapist or your girlfriend, or,
Hmm.
I mean, people just put way too much pressure on a relationship. If this person
Yeah,
needs to be your therapist, your gym coach, your running partner, your real estate partner, your business partner, like that's just more than Eros is a very fragile, delicate, elusive, muse. And like, yeah, we want dynamic separation. So let's go out and secretly meet at this bar and pretend we don't know each other and watch each other from afar and, flirt, play games like
yeah,
that. And I mean, I think like 2 nights a week, spending the night together is sort of ideal. But it's so practical to cohabitate,
I know.
especially then you don't have to like drive to see each other. And, so it would be, I guess, ideal in a cohabitation situation to have two separate rooms and some kind of way that you can be on your own when you need your own space, and to cultivate your own things, and to keep kind of cultivating yourself and cultivating mystery with your partner, and reinventing yourself so that kind of stays fresh, and go on trips together like you said. Like, I mean, the whole thing about jealousy and why is there this deep fear, and there is this deep fear. I think part of it is actual biological, like, yeah, there's a biological adaptation toward mate guarding, which just makes sense. Just as we have, there is a biological urge towards selfishness
Mhm.
and, you know, a willingness to fight to defend yourself and to defend your offspring. But there's also a biological adaptation towards selflessness, people just
Mhm.
running into the burning building, instinctively, or, uh, you know, cats raising puppies or whatever. There is in the polyamorous literature, they call it compersion, the sense of pleasure you get from your partner having pleasure. And so the more that we can deconstruct our own insecurities, the less of that fear there is. And it's a real actual fear. I mean, I ended up moving to open up the relationship with the hope that we could find our spark with someone else and bring it to each other, and he immediately fell in love and left me and had kids. So, my worst nightmare came true. I had to finish the house by myself. Like, to this day, it is a constant, never-ending struggle to manage this homestead, and
Yeah.
sometimes I regret it, and I'm like, "God, if I had just waited till menopause, then I wouldn't have even needed sex anymore, and now we could still be together." We never fought. Um, but it is what happened, and I mean, I think it makes more sense to open up the relationship from the beginning, because if you wait until the 5-year phase when your dopamine,
Mhm.
your serotonin is worn out, and then you find a
Mm.
new person, there's no way you could compete at that point. So, oh, and then the other thing, and this is kind of a little bit, sexual, but um, in tantra school, they tell you to try to avoid having ejaculation as much as possible. Or for
Mm.
women, there's kind of the clitoral stimulation is the female equivalent, but to sort of like preserve holding on to that. And that's not just for the strength of your relationship, it's for the also your sort of spiritual,
Mhm.
you want to cultivate being, keeping a certain amount of tension, to have kind of spiritual fires, because when you release it, and obviously you have to do it sometimes, everyone is
Mhm.
different on that, like young men being more so than older men, but just kind of like being aware that you don't want to like overload yourself on each other's presence,
Right.
and that will make it last longer.
Hmm. No, that's very helpful. I mean, obviously, every situation is unique, but like, yeah, I'm very curious to see like how this awareness plays out. Yeah, 'cause it's not like you can just like plop yourself down in like a new town where like this is the new normal. It's like like it's like 80 to 99% of folks are like still playing like the escalator game, and um yeah, I've long felt that like we definitely need separate bedrooms, and just so like you have like kind of that fortress of solitude feel, like this is all your stuff and it's like exactly how you want it, your level, your style, your level of cleanliness, your level of all that. There's like no compromise needed in any of those rooms.
That's a
um
really big thing, because
yeah,
if you don't have a really strong level of cleanliness, it's not really fair for someone to impose that on you, but at
yeah,
the same but vice versa, like, yeah.
yeah. um and then yeah, also like I also think about like the amount of attraction. I mean, for me, I've never felt my attraction towards any of my partners wane over time. I think,
Hmm.
granted, like the longest, like I was with my ex 8 years, and like I always
Hmm.
thought she was, you know, total smoke show. Like more gray she got, more wrinkled. I'm like, oh, great, like um, but for her, it was like she's like, you need to leave, like, or I need to go. I mean, I need to miss you for a bit. Um,
I think,
so
well, that
yeah,
gets into, I mentioned in the book, this book called What Women Want: The New Science of
hmm,
Female Desire, that suggests that desire wanes more quickly for women than for men in monogamy, contrary to popular belief. Part and it may be because men have higher sex drives overall, or because men can kind of diversify their sexual interests um, more easily, whereas for women, you kind of evolution would more strongly encourage you to have children with different men, since you can only really have a few children in your life, that it would be more important for you to move on
Hmm.
and find a new partner to kind of mix up your genetic input. So that would make sense. And it's really sad, because it would be so nice to have forever after happily ever forever after. And some people can do it.
I do wonder about that. I mean, I know people do it, and I also wonder like how truthful are
They're
they?
happy.
Yeah, like yeah, I just grew up in the Midwest, and everyone was, "Oh gosh, everything's great. I wish there were 10 of me," and like, "Oh, life is so good." I'm like, "No, it's not. You're not alive. I can see in your
Oh,
in your face, in your partner's face, the passive aggressiveness in the kitchen. You're not alive. Like this is not your best life. I know it." Um, so as we come to a close, thank you so much. This is an honor to get to ask you questions and explore your thinking. How can folks find out more about you and especially this book? I mean, this next book, I can't wait to hear about it. Like, what's the best way to stay in touch with you?
my website is beforewar.com, and I just started a Substack, which I haven't even started putting out there yet. Um, I actually think Substack is going to be the best way for me to kind of the best audience for my work, since I don't do well with sort of Instagram, like
Hmm.
one photo. And I have like I like to write this much, and have it be received. So um I can be like Before War is the name of the book, so you can always search on that, like on Instagram or Facebook. And I have a YouTube channel where I have some pretty entertaining videos. Um, like the real history of the world is a good way to kind of, without buying my book and reading sort of like it's a bit thick. The real history of the world is kind of a summary of that. So yeah,
Okay.
thank you so much.
So your YouTube channel, your Substack. I also just started a Substack, by the way, because
Oh, awesome.
yeah. So I'll make sure to follow you there. Um, and then beforewar.com, and I'll make sure all that gets included.
Thank you so much.
So
This was
thank you.
really
This is a pleasure.
great questions. It was a pleasure, Brandon. So glad to meet you.